Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast of the Game Time Discussions podcast. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to talk about the NFC West. Just to kind of preface this division, we have one of the probably predominant teams in the San Francisco 49ers sitting atop the mountain, trying to find a way to win the Super Bowl, truly. And then it trickles down. This is one of the more spread out divisions in football. All the way down to the Arizona Cardinals. So we're going to start with the Arizona Cardinals, and we're going to kind of talk about where they go from last season. Kyler didn't play the whole season. They had injuries late to their left tackle, DJ Humphreys. Just kind of talk about their defensive line issues and things like that. So, what do you think they should do with their tackle position?
I think it's just something that needs to be really addressed. They haven't really figured out that spot. A couple off seasons ago, they did extend DJ Humphreys, but it was kind of like he was the only tackle on the market at the time, and so they kind of had to overspend. And following a late season ACL injury, it's like all of a sudden they really don't have a plan at that position. They invested in the right tackle. In recent drafts as well, and that hadn't panned out. So that's really kind of one of the biggest areas of need for them. But like you said earlier, it was just kind of felt like a lost year. One that you knew that they were going to be patient bringing in Kyler. He had a late ACL injury in 2022, missed the first 8 games of the season, and really kind of slowly came along. But obviously there was limitations you could tell in his game. Didn't really have the receiver position consistently figured out. Obviously, they lost DeAndre Hopkins, or let him go, rather. Marquise Brown was in and out of the lineup with the injury towards the end of the year and didn't really have anybody step up in that role. He did establish some kind of connection with Trey McBride, which is a positive thing going forward because it seems like he always loved throwing to his tight end. So it looks like they've got a good young guy to kind of build around the rest of their immediate future.
Right.
But right now, because of their struggles, they're in a prime position to take what we've told before is the best player in the draft. It looks like, in all likelihood, 1, 2, 3 will be quarterback, unless we get surprised, and many things can change because we have the combine starting tomorrow. But yeah, Marvin Harrison Jr. Is somebody that's an instant impact level starter that should just not skip a beat.
Yeah.
I don't expect him to one way or one bit. And Kyler is a great situation for him, and it's exactly what Kyler needs to really regain his form that he had because, they didn't have any deep playoff runs, but he's had some success as a starter in this league. And we'll just kind of see what happens in this era of football with Joseph getting at the helm.
I think that if you look at the draft, and if at 3, where New England picks, they could go quarterback, and then Marvin Harrison falls in the laps of Arizona, and every Arizona fan should want that. That is exactly the perfect situation. But at the same time, if he gets picked at 3, I think that would leave one of the quarterbacks on the board. And I know there's some quarterback needy teams: Atlanta, Minnesota, the Raiders.
If there was ever a scenario where Marvin Harrison's gone when they get to 4, obviously they don't need a quarterback, and their phone will be ringing off the hook, and they will benefit.
Yeah.
Even though I think the best case scenario for them is taking Marvin Harrison Jr., they're still going to get multiple first round picks and a lot of building pieces moving forward. They already have the league's best draft capital graded this upcoming draft with all the assets that they have, multiple first round picks, early second round pick as well. So basically 3 first round picks to build on. And then if you added more on top of that, that would just be icing on the cake. And even trading back to a hypothetical 11th or 12th, you're still in the range where you can probably get some quality pieces. Because they do have a lot of holes on both sides of the ball. Obviously, they weren't really successful in total offense or defense this year. And, there's not really many established stars. They've kind of pawned off who they've had. Really, Buda Baker is all that they have defensively as mainstays. So, yeah, they need help all around.
Right.
It's a multi-year process, but, they have all the assets in the world, and that's the perfect situation for them to rebuild this pretty quickly.
Right. And I think if the perfect situation, if Marvin Harrison goes at 3, would be actually going to 8 and switching with Atlanta, because then you still get wide receiver, most likely. And if wide receiver's not there, you're definitely going to get a left tackle.
Right.
So it's one of the two. And that makes it very, because at 11, you might miss out on those guys. We grade blue chip guys, and there's not ever that many in a draft. And in this draft, there might be maybe 1 or 2 more at the positions that are very important.
Right.
And they could find one of those guys at 8. And I don't know that they could do it at 11. So
yeah, I think Atlanta is a good range in the draft to trade, but just because we kind of have the anticipation that Atlanta's going to go more so the veteran route, but in the scenario that they trade back, they're a lot closer. They have to give up a lot less to move up. We'll see, but I kind of would envision something more along the lines of trading up after trading back, kind of similar to what Miami did with Jalen Waddle in 2021 when they got 3 first-round picks from San Fran. They went all the way back to 11. They moved back up to 6 to grab him. So they got the guy that they needed. That's exactly something that Arizona can do. They have all the assets in the world to make that happen.
Yeah.
So to me, if you trade back to Atlanta, you might get an additional first, but you probably get up to 3 firsts from one of the QB needy teams, especially if they're kind of feeling desperate, which it sounds like 1 or 2 of them might be.
Right. And I think that, like you said, they have so many holes. Getting those extra, like they have 6 picks in the top 90 in this draft class. You hit on 3, you're really happy.
Oh yeah.
And there's some positions of need that are mostly in the trenches. To me, if I look at the team, yes, you can make the case that if Marquise Brown, we don't expect him to be back. Your wide receiving core is pretty thin. You're playing with Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch, these types of guys. And so, yes, that would be a definite position of need. This is a really deep wide receiver class, though, luckily. So you don't have to, you don't have to reach on anybody. At 35, there's a lot of really good wide receivers if you wait till 35. So I think that's something that they could do too. So
yeah, and just kind of the outlook that we have, I think we can both agree that I don't expect Arizona to turn this around the Houston way and just all of a sudden become a playoff team. I still think that they're probably at the very bottom of their division, but they should make this, once again, the toughest division of football, or one of them. I kind of see it being similar to what the AFC North was this year, where they had 4 teams finish with winning records, despite 3 of them losing quarterbacks for significant times. That was just so impressive. I don't think that maybe all 4 of them will flirt with winning records, but 6-7 wins as the last place team is probably going to be above average compared to the rest of the divisions, and I see them in that range.
Right.
Probably will be a playoff spoiler towards the end of the year. They have been in the past, so it looks like that's what they did with Philly earlier this year, where they had the division essentially locked up and then came back and beat them in a meaningless game, but it vaulted Dallas to the 2 seed. Dallas missed out on that opportunity, but those are the kinds of things that just completely put the playoffs upside down. And so that's what I kind of see them playing that role, but to an even more competitive extent and more consistent this year.
Well, out of their 4 games, I mean, they beat, Philly, and they also beat Dallas early in the year on a backup quarterback. More of a, I don't even know how to describe the situation that was happening there, because they then shipped him off to play for Minnesota for a little while, and so he was. But yeah, they played with the backup quarterback to beat Dallas, beat Philly. There's good things, and we should expect positive regression from 4-13. So yeah, especially with the full season of Kyler, hopefully.
Oh yeah,
so
for sure. Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on. We'll switch it up to Seattle. Kind of a little bit of a stagnant year after their success that they experienced in 2022. They were really one of the biggest surprises. We expected them to kind of fall all the way back. We have a good Seattle friend that we always, not made fun of, but just kind of poked at, saying like, once Russ is gone, you have nothing left.
Mm-hmm.
And once they were gone, they did get a ton for him, but we were like, this is going to take some time, and it really didn't. And then this year, after winning the NFC West, they expected them to, either repeat or at least contend once again in the playoffs, and they really kind of took a couple steps back, missed the playoffs at the very end of the season. And so now it's just kind of, where do you go from here to kind of regain the form of what you kind of established a year ago?
Well, I think also, we didn't expect Geno Smith to play so well. Out of the gate, we were like, we were expecting, Russ was higher up on the board,
Mm-hmm.
and then Geno Smith came in, and we were like, okay, he's going to have to fight for a position with Drew Lock, that type of thing. But he took it with stride and played great.
Yeah,
and
I mean, his turnaround was one of the most unprecedented things we've seen from that position. I mean, we've seen players have great seasons or great years, fall off, and then go to another situation and thrive. Well, he was in a second-round pick, first quarterback off the board when he came out, and he struggled, and he never really established anything, and he became a journeyman quarterback that fell into the right situation and just made the most of it. It was really impressive to see. Solid yet unspectacular year this year. Didn't really bring him over the top. He did deal with some injuries, and Drew Lock came in and was serviceable, which back then when we thought when Drew Lock came in via trade,
right,
as an additional asset in that trade, we thought that he would be the starter. And then Geno ended up being him out. So it's a somewhat stronger quarterback room that I would say you don't really feel a drop off one way or the other.
Right. Yeah.
I've always liked Drew Lock as a talent, but I just felt like the intangibles, he couldn't really put it together in Denver, and that's why they were so quick to move off them to try to go get Russ, which obviously didn't work out in their favor. But
right, of course,
their loss in Seattle's game because they had got so many assets from that trade, and it's really helped speed up the rebuild process. Even though they're not necessarily there yet, they didn't have to fall to the bottom to get the way they wanted.
They have great. They have really good skill players at this point. I don't know what'll happen by the end of the offseason, of course, because we have talked about Tyler Lockett being possibly a cap casualty, because they are 21st in the cap.
Right. It's one of the strange things because I mean they kind of went with the best player available approach last year. Obviously their top 5 pick wasn't even theirs, but picking Devon Witherspoon, who thrived as a rookie corner, and then their original pick, they selected Jackson Smith in the Jigba, which was not a pressing need at all. It wasn't a great fit, but it was just best player available. They already solved their biggest need, and they were just trying to keep on adding talent. And so it was an odd fit. He had an up and down rookie year, but they also have one of the lowest rates of 3 receiver sets in the NFL. So being a slot guy, it's not really something that's probably the best situation for you. He probably would have done much better elsewhere if he would have fallen to the Chargers or something of that nature. But with Tyler Lockett being 31, having a $26 million cap hit, it's kind of tough to swallow. And so even a restructure doesn't make a ton of sense to me because I feel like, it's either this year or next year.
Right, of course.
Like, he's gone. So kind of, I don't know if he'll be gone. I'm more confident that Jamal Adams, who has the same cap hit, will be a casualty just because of his injuries and just not being what he once was,
right,
and
course.
falling out of his prime fast. Whereas Lockett's still been productive as a complement to DK Metcalf, and I don't deny that he wouldn't fill a similar role again this year. But I just don't feel like he fits their timeline any longer. It's time to kind of retool.
Right, of course. Also, one of their biggest needs is their interior line. All 3 of their interior linemen that started this year are free agents going into this offseason. And like we said, they don't have the cap necessarily to resign all of them. They're going to have to find guys that are cheaper in some way, maybe in the draft, maybe in a different way, just to keep that position stout and keep going with it.
Right.
So
and they've also addressed tackle last year or 2 years ago, taking Charles Cross. hasn't really panned out in just an instant impact level. But he's still there. He's been serviceable, but compared to the other ones in that class, he hasn't really taken the leap that you would have hoped for. So that's a whole unit that they really need to address. And then also defensively, 30th ranked defense. They just really couldn't stop anybody, and that resulted in them having the worst time of possession. It's hard to win many games when you're only having the ball 26 and a half minutes a game. So that's kind of the areas that they really need to address. But I mean, it's coming together. I think it was just a weird blend of aging veterans that they brought in. They brought back Bobby Wagner, who is still playing at an elite level, but then there's also holes here and there, and Jordan Brooks is coming to his own. He's also a pending free agent. Leonard Williams, who they traded for I believe a second round pick at the trade deadline. Feels like usually when you trade day 2 picks for guys at the deadline that are expiring contracts, they tend to re-sign those guys. So, they don't really have a ton of cap space to begin with. So that's really gonna kind of be one of their lone, I guess, improvements, even though it's just an internal re-sign so he can have his first full season in Seattle.
Yeah, and I saw some things about him. They're expecting about 3 years for like 51-ish million, which will hit him at. They'll probably get a cap hit about 12 million on his deal.
Especially early on. It's usually.
Yeah, so I would expect him to come back, but I just think we're cutting it real close because that's basically all of it.
Right.
So finding ways to Jamal Adams being cap casualty saves you another 26 mil. So finding ways to get guys money that are going to help your team more than an aging safety.
Also, something that we can't overlook is Pete Carroll stepping down. He was one of the longest tenured coaches for 14 years there, and they've gone with Mike McDonald, which is a defensive mind from Baltimore, and they bring in Ryan Grubb, who's hasn't had NFL experience, but led Washington, the Huskies, with their passing attack, and it being so successful the last couple of years with Michael Penix. And so that kind of tie also makes it a little curious in that range, because they're one of those that we've said in the past with past videos. They're kind of a true wild card at the very dead middle of the first round. And who's to say if, for whatever reason, the 4th or 5th quarterback don't get taken early and they slide down. I know Geno is there because he restructured his contract, but who knows if they want to take that chance on one of those guys. And if Michael Penix falls into a system that he's been and grown into the first round pick that he is, that could be a great situation for him, especially with the weapons that they have.
And it's a transition from Washington to Washington, which is, right down the street. So that's always helpful too, is just kind of the same situation, the same area, very comfortable. It would also make a lot of sense there if JJ McCarthy went there, because then he would have a veteran that's been there, done it, and he doesn't have to start right away. He gets to learn because he's the younger of the two, one of the least NFL ready of the quarterbacks, but has a lot higher ceiling than the others. So maybe that's the option too. So,
sure.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that, Seattle is definitely ready to retool and get going. So we're going to move up to the next team here, and we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams, so one stat that I just love seeing, they paid $2 million for Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams. $2 million for both of those guys. When you do stuff like that, there's very little reason to not win 10 games to me.
Right.
Because they have I guess he was the runner-up basically at Offensive Player, the Rookie of the Year. And then you had the third overall Defensive Rookie of the Year in Kobe Bryant on the other side. And then Kyron Williams comes out of nowhere.
Right. Yeah, they did an excellent job. I mean, they started out the second lowest win total projection in the NFC and end up winning 10 games with the roster that they had, getting rid of the pieces that they had, Jalen Ramsey getting let go, the pass rushers that they just kind of recycled here and there, parting ways with them. And then the offensive line just kind of was piece by piece together since Andrew Whitworth and company left. And they did a phenomenal job. I mean, that's just a huge testament to Sean McVay and what he's been able to do. It seemed like he was really close to walking out the door or taking a step
Right.
away for a little bit. And then all of a sudden, it's just kind of a new energy in the building. And it seems like he'll be there for years to come, which is what Rams fans want to hear right now.
Well, and, that pieced together offensive line, Kyron Williams had the most rushing yards of any running back per game this year, behind a pieced together offensive line, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, they had their own woes and stuff. But they had one of the mid-pack sacks given up this year. And so I don't think that there's any problem with, using that style. I think getting a guy, though, and we have them mocked to get an interior offensive lineman. I think that they're one of the harder teams to mock because they have either you could see them as having a lot of holes, or they have a bunch of just normal, good, above average guys on their team. So yeah, we mocked them interior offensive line in our draft in Jackson Powers Johnson. If that happens, you shear up the guard spot and you're ready to go, and your O-line is basically have 5 guys that can start for you and are above average at their position. So.
Right. And it's kind of refreshing just because of the way that they're building this team up again, because we've been so accustomed to them the last, several years being very aggressive, getting high-end talent, not using their draft picks. F them picks is what their GM would be wearing after their Super Bowl run. This is their first draft pick in the first round since Jared Goff in 2016. That's 8 full years of football without a first-round pick. And now they finally have one, and it sounds like that's what they're really kind of leaning into, is developing, drafting guys, because that's kind of what they need to do to get over the cap issues that they had for so many years, which they did a great job maneuvering to afford other pieces. But now it's like you finally got to,
right,
figure out a way to make your roster youthful again and not just go the veteran route to compete. And so they did a great job of doing that, and it seems like they're really going to be very competitive going forward.
Well, I think that where it starts, we just talked about the offensive line, but let's talk about the defensive line. I mean, you pair Kobe with Aaron Donald, and now you might have one of the best tandems at D tackle in the league, if not the best. And I mean, you can make cases for other teams, but like, this guy's a rookie. He's a rookie D lineman that came out of a late round pick. No one really expected anything, and they just hit on him. And that's 2 guys in their draft that are not first 3 round draft picks that are just killing it this year.
Absolutely.
So if they can use the draft picks like they did, in the later rounds, maybe this first round draft pick is, a Hall of Famer, because that's basically how, it should translate if they can do the same things that they did in the draft. So, yeah, they're exciting for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the flaws was we did see, the secondary after Jalen Ramsey was let go, and it's just like, man, they really have nobody. This is a defense that you better start every fantasy football player that you have on your roster that's playing them every week, and just be a weekly team and it just really wasn't the case. They were very formidable. They struggled to create takeaways, which is really the testament to a great defense, is being able to flip the game, especially if your offense is struggling. But so maybe that, I guess, improves. It remains to be seen, but they did much better than anticipated with the talent that they had. And like you said, late round picks is just kind of where they've hit on recently, and it's just, that's always a great feeling when you're in an organization trying to turn things around.
Right, of course. I mentioned earlier the sacks. I was thinking of a different team. They were the lowest sack total in the league. That's what I meant to say. Not mid. They were the lowest sack total on a team that you were saying was a piece of their offensive line.
Yeah.
And which is pretty cool. Kyron Williams and the low sack total. Of course, that has a little bit to do with Matthew Stafford getting the ball out of his hands, getting receivers that are really good off the line of scrimmage and stuff. But yeah, they did a great job. So yeah, let's move over to probably the deepest, most ready team in football. Position by position, the San Francisco 49ers have the best overall team to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it showed in the stats. So, just kind of want to see your take on what do they need to do to win a Super Bowl, to win the big game.
I mean, it's just kind of hard to feel like what else do we have to do?
Mm-hmm.
You got a quarterback that's playing lights out couldn't have asked for a better start for a 7th-round pick. NFC Championship appearance, Super Bowl appearance. Say what you want about him being a top 10 quarterback or not. That's just besides the fact that he's just way over exceeded what we thought he would be. If anything, a lifetime backup. And he's stepped in very early and just thrived. And actually been in a better, more improved version of what they expected out of Jimmy G, who's been durable, coachable, and knows how to protect himself. So, at least for the short term, I don't expect anything different of them just continuing to dominate the NFC like they have. 4 NFC Championship appearances the last 5 years, 2 Super Bowl appearances, could have had a third had there not been Christian McCaffrey playing quarterback 2 years ago towards the end of the game due to his injury and Josh Johnson concussed, all that stuff. But I mean, really, it's hard to say what else they can do because I expect them to continue to stay aggressive because that's what they've kind of shown. That's their agenda is trading at the deadline to improve their roster, take gambles on early first-round draft picks like Cleveland Farrell, Chase Young that may or may not have worked out with their situations as a top pick previously, and add them to the depth that they already have at their defensive line, which has been their strength. Yeah, I mean they just have all pros all across the board. Best running back in football, second best tight end overall in football, 2 Pro Bowl / All Pro receivers, best left tackle, All Pro linebacker, Pro Bowl safeties. You got corners that are upcoming. You got one of the best defensive ends, best interior lineman. Like it best complement to the linebacker that you already have. Like it's just an embarrassment of riches that eventually it's gonna start to deteriorate because they're not gonna be able to keep everybody. But at the very present moment, the majority of them should be back next year. Remains to be seen with Dre Greenlaw, the freak injury that he had. He's more of a heart and soul of that defense. Even though he's not the first, second, third best player, he just is the epitome of the San Francisco way.
Of course.
What we've seen their linebackers be over the last decades.
Yeah, the vocal Mike Singletary-esque type of
energy guy. And so he's a huge loss, especially being the last game of the year on an Achilles injury. I don't expect him to be ready anytime soon, if at all, this year. And we'll see what kind of toll that took because as good as they were defensively this year and as they have been, they really struggled towards the end of the year and in the playoffs, how they were trailing to inferior teams. And, they've gotten through the year and you should expect them to win double-digit games once again, be the favorite team to beat, but you got to close the deal at some point.
Right. And, of course it was overtime. It was close. It wasn't like they, gave the game away. But at the same time, there were mistakes that we all noticed that should have not happened that would have changed the outlook of that game. They would have been up 17-0, which would have made a huge difference. I don't know if any team other than that Atlanta New England game where they come back from 28-3, where a team comes back in the Super Bowl down 17-0 against a team that is better than them. Top to bottom, San Francisco is considered better than the Chiefs.
Right.
One has Patrick Mahomes, one has Brock Purdy.
Yeah.
And that might be the biggest difference. So
yeah, and you just kind of wonder what kind of hit that'll take to your confidence when you, in 2 Super Bowls in 4 years, playing the same quarterback, having them up in the fourth quarter, and you're not able to close the deal after double-digit leads in both games. And then a lot of little confusing part was, obviously overtime Super Bowl, second ever one, first time since the new overtime rules from the Buffalo Kansas City situation, and the complete difference of the team that it's the Chiefs who were like, we want the ball last. We're going to go win the game. We know what to do. We practice. We talk about this all the time. And then a lot of big names, big, I guess, voices in that locker room just being like, oh, yeah, we didn't talk about that. We didn't know. I didn't know what the situation was. Or it's like, that's very concerning because I hold Kyle Shanahan very highly as one of the best coaches in football.
Mm-hmm.
And just, it seems like continuously he doesn't get the upper hand when it matters most. For whatever reason, either being too conservative, getting away from what they do best. I don't remember the numbers at the top of my head, but Christian McCaffrey just being able to piece up the defense the way he was and then kind of shine away from him.
Yeah.
In the second half, obviously in overtime, he got a big chunk of the total yardage that he ended up with, but he kind of disappeared after 2 quarters, and it was like he was the one saving grace that you were having because Debo wasn't having a big game, and Brandon Ayuk wasn't really a factor, and George Kittle 2 catches for 5 yards. So and Purdy wasn't playing bad. He just wasn't winning them the game. Christian McCaffrey was the MVP of that team during that game, and they shot away from him. So those kinds of things, it's like, if it happens one time, okay. This isn't the second, third, fourth, or fifth time that we've seen Kyle Shanahan do something of this nature. And so it kind of feels like a situation of, it reminds me of Buffalo in the 90s when going to 4 straight games and just not getting over the hump. And it's just like, man, we just keep hitting the ceiling and we can't go through it. And, maybe at some point something's got to give.
Yeah, I think that, you can kind of look at Purdy as the game manager when he's got the players that he has. And I mean, Jaquan Jennings played great too. He's the third receiver option. So it's like Kyle Juszczyk, possibly the best fullback in football, if not the best right now. And so you just have these guys that are surrounding him. And I guess maybe Shanahan gets away from McCaffrey because there's so many mouths to feed, or something like that. I don't know. Honestly, I have no idea. But my game plan every time San Francisco plays is give Christian McCaffrey the ball until we can't give it to him anymore. And I don't want him to get hurt.
Or they just can't stop him.
Yeah.
Or they just start to stop him and you're just trying to...
Which is fine.
Then we square peg and round hole.
Yeah.
But that's not what the situation is.
But now we have play action. Now we've ran the ball all the game, and now they're ready. They think we're going to do it. Now we play action, which is something that they do a lot. They're really good at it. And they, get guys open on plays like that because they have a guy like Christian McCaffrey running the ball. So yeah, I'm not sure. They like I said, and before the Super Bowl, we talked about this. Who do we think will win this game? And both of us said the Chiefs, because it's really hard to bet against Patrick Mahomes. But if I'm going to pick a team to bet against him, 49ers are stacked top to bottom.
They're the exact team that you would want to, because they know how to control the clock. They're more talented. They're
great defense.
Just better in almost every single level. But the problem is when you're not better at quarterback or head coach, that's the epitome of winning or losing a Super Bowl, those two positions. And so obviously they need to figure out ways to make sure they're prepared in situations going forward, because I anticipate them being back in the NFC Championship game at the very least next year, unless there's a fall off, injury bug is hit, what have you. The NFC is just much weaker than the AFC, and the path to least resistance is just not there for the 49ers, especially with Dallas and Philly kind of seeming like they're going to take a slight or at least a step back.
Yeah.
Detroit is really the only team that I see as a true contender in the NFC at the very moment. And San Francisco is to me the much more talented team presently. But we'll just kind of see where we go from here.
Yeah. I think when you look at this division as a whole, the Rams are really exciting. And the 49ers are really exciting. And you want the Rams to do well because they don't have these big names. That's like me. That's how I feel. Like the underdog. It feels like an underdog story. With 49ers, it's like that's the opposite. They're they're Goliath. And we're having a hard time understanding why they keep losing to David. And it's just something that I personally can't get over because they have so much talent. And I can talk about it all day because it just blows my mind a little bit. One thing I will say, they do need to get better at right tackle because the right tackle, McKivitz, gave up 9 sacks last year, which is just too many. And that's their biggest hole. And otherwise, they have a really good offensive line. 34
good everywhere.
34 total sacks, which is tied for the lowest with the Rams. So yeah, I just think that's the only position of real need, unless you're going to say quarterback. But why would you care about that when he's getting paid less than $1 million?
At least for the moment, yeah. Like for the next 2 years, like run it back, continue running back, or the same strategy. In 2025, 2026, we'll reassess because then we'll be like, is Brock Purdy worth the extension that they're probably going to have to give him? He's probably going to be a franchise tag candidate, and they're going to start losing the guys. And who knows if they can draft and replace the Brandon Ayuk's, who's probably going to be gone, Trent Williams, who will kind of retire and move on once Christian McCaffrey kind of moves out of his prime, etc. and so on. But that's years away.
Yeah.
For now, the time is now, and there's no reason they shouldn't be winning a Super Bowl based on the talent that they have. But that just kind of shows how hard it is in this league to win it, because it's such a league of parity. And when you have the most talent and you just continuously cannot get it done, like that just shows like you have to put in the work and you have to prep and out scheme and outplay the teams, even when you aren't playing your best football.
Right. Of course. And they can do that. They can play 50%. Well, not maybe, they can play 80% football and beat a lot of teams.
Yeah.
And hopefully they're just playing the best at the end of the line. At the end of the year, that's when they need to be at their point. But they can win 12 games just by being 80%.
Yeah. And like I said earlier in the Super Bowl, Debo was a non-factor, Ayuk was a non-factor, Kittle was a non-factor. Trent Williams had multiple crucial penalties, and yet CMC was just run down the throat. And they were in control of the game until a botched punt return. So that just kind of shows like they had 3-4 of their best players just not bring their A game, and they're still beating you up. And obviously the switch flipped, but just they have to put together the perfect game. You have to get over the hump. If not, I don't know. We'll kind of think of the disappointments in totality of like looking back on teams and rosters and eras of football. I think first one that comes to mind is like the Steelers of the later Big Ben era, how they were consistently 12-13 wins and how they were coming up short in the playoffs. And it's just like you came and put together an appearance.
Right.
Their most recent one was 2010.
Yeah.
And obviously they had much, much better teams than that exact team in the 2015 through 2018 years. And just coming up short, it's kind of the equivalent in my eyes, but maybe even bigger because they have gotten to those big games and they've fallen short. So that's just kind of how I view them.
Well, you were just talking about Buffalo, the back to back to back.
Right.
Those teams weren't nearly as good.
Oh yeah.
And this is like one of those things where this team is really good and they can't figure it out. Those teams weren't nearly as good and they just kept getting there because the AFC wasn't as good, things like that. Now we're seeing like this San Francisco is really good. Like you would be happy to pick a starter. You would be happy to have him on your team and he'd probably play over the guys that you have. But just at this point, they're not able to get over the hump. So, but yeah, this is the end of our NFC West talk. Hopefully we're of course going to have more talks about San Francisco and all the rest of the teams in this division. But we really appreciate y'all watching today and being a part of this discussion. We're almost done with our divisional outlooks for this next year, or for last year and up to next year, and getting ready for the draft and stuff like that. But we really appreciate it. Please go like, subscribe, and comment in our below, and go check out all of our socials. They'll be in the description. But yeah,
I appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Like Em said, check out our most recent videos. I want to hear y'all's thoughts because San Fran's the team to beat, and yet they keep falling up short. What is the problem? What can they do to get over that hump? And then who they got to look out for in this division? Because, like I said, this is a division that will probably be one of the best, if not the best, in football next year, most competitive wise. So I'm excited to see what you guys have to say. Do what you can, like all our socials, all that good stuff. And again, thanks for hanging out with us. We appreciate y'all every single time. We're building the community the way we should. And we just can't wait to continue discussing things. And once we're done with this series, getting on to new things and breaking down and reacting to news that comes out. Because right now, it's all speculation. But, Combine starts tomorrow. Free agency starts in a couple weeks. That's where we start reacting to things that are actually happening, not speculating what could happen. So I'm excited for that and can't wait to see where we go from here.
The most we've seen is franchise tags so far. That's it. And hasn't even been that many. So
right. And that's not even guarantees that people can be on the same team because the two that have been franchise tagged could be traded. Right. Who knows? But once we react to the results that actually happen, that's what I'm excited for and seeing.
For sure.
Those kinds of styles of videos will be a little bit different, more instantaneous, spontaneity, those kinds of things that we're riffing off the jump rather than, scheduling and prepping and doing the research of how to do stuff. So
it'll be more real, like realistic into like how this world works because it's ever changing. We talk about the salary cap all the time. Salary cap has changed since day one. The worst salaries cap has changed to, still one of the worst, but like has come up $40 million, which is a ton. Things like that you just, you have to follow really intensely to really get the full story, basically.
Yeah, I'm excited for, when we do start live streaming and seeing the jaw dropping news that happens as we're on air and then reacting to it on the spot and just seeing how we do, what we think, and then come back to it and see if our thoughts came true, if what have you. So
day of trade deadlines, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we appreciate it though, guys. And like we said, go like this video and go talk to us on other social media accounts and stuff like that. And we'll talk to y'all later.
Appreciate y'all. Take care.